engineering, always in Brescia, under the supervision of Professor Parmigiani, this in 2002, working on photoemission and resonant photoemission on strongly correlated systems at synchrotron radiation facilities. Presently, she's leading the laboratory ELFOS in Brescia, which is active in the field of time-resolved spectroscopies and focusing mainly on interface systems like graphene metal or organic molecules metal. She's co-author of more than 80 papers published in international reference journals. And tonight, she will talk about, I mean, it's a very interesting topic, I think. It's a very nice marriage between fundamental science and technology. So it will be from fundamental photoemission to laser photoemission, so disclosing novel phenomena in the time domain at surfaces and interfaces.
Okay. Thank you very much, Giovanni, for this introduction. I want to thank also Barbara and Giovanni again for this invitation. This is my first time here, and it's a pleasure for me to be here. Now, as reported in the title of this talk, in this talk I will compare in the first part traditional photoemission and laser photoemission in order to understand what does change and what we can learn more by using laser rather than a lamp or a synchrotron. In the second part, I will show you recent results obtained by my group, my research group, on interfaces. Okay. Photoemission is based on photoelectric effect. This is one of the experiments, of the most important experiment, because it signed the beginning of the modern physics. Photoelectric effect was discovered by Hertz in 1887, and the idea is the following. Light arrives on a metal plate, and if the frequency of the coming light is larger than a cutoff frequency F0, electrons are able to escape from the metal plate and are collected to a second collector, a metal plate here, at a positive potential, and this way we are able to close the circuits and to read the current here. The starting point is that the frequency of the incoming light has to be larger than a cutoff frequency. Okay, this effect was explained by Einstein, explained that when electrons has to be escaped from the material, has to pay a sort of fee, a sort of tax that corresponds to across the surface. It means that we have a potential barrier at the surface, and if the energy of the coming light is larger, this potential barrier that is called work function, electron is able to escape from the materials. And Einstein wins the Nobel Prize in 1921 for this paper, for this work. Photoemission becomes a tool to study the electronic structure thanks to the paper of Sigban. And the point is that since this data, we have a lot of papers that have been published where photoemission is used to characterize, to study the electronic structure. And the number of this paper increases exponentially every year. This is because photoemission is really a powerful tool to study the electronic structure of materials. Okay, after 30 years later, with respect to the paper of Sigban, we have the first paper where laser used to have a photoemission. In this case, we have not a continuous laser, but we have a pulsed laser, picoseconds or better femtoseconds laser. What does change? Change that if you want to study the electrons that come from inside of the materials very close to the nucleus, you need energy that comes from 100 to 1000 eV. In this way, we are able to study the so-called core electrons. When we use an energy coming from 10 electron volt to 100 electron volt, we are able to study the electrons that more external, that coming from the valence band. Laser is here. The photon energy is about 1, 2 electron volt to 10 electron volt. And then laser spectroscopy is able to study the electrons that come from the valence band. And the point is that you can change all these parameters or the laser of the laser that we use to study different effects. You can change the laser photon energy. You can change the width of this pulse laser that is usually in the femtoseconds regime. You can also change the repetition rate. It means the number of pulses that you have in 1 second, and also the laser fluence, that means the intensity of these pulses. Okay, in order to understand, in my opinion, what does change when we use a laser rather than a lamp, I want to retrace the three-step model. Three-step model is familiar for the people that use photoemission because it is used to explain the photoemission process. Three-step model is based on this process. We have at the first the excitation of the electrons. The electron absorbs the light, the photons, and then is excited to an higher level. Then it moves towards the surface in the second step, and in the third step we have the penetration of the surface. Now, the first step, it's important to have the energy conservation law. It means that electrons absorbs the light and then is excited in the vacuum, and here we have the spectrum. It's important that the photon energy has to be smaller with respect to the work function, and in this way photoemission is able to measure the occupied state. This is not completely true when we use a laser as a source, because you can have two different phenomena. If the photon energy is larger with respect to the work function, we have the so-called linear photoemission, and you are able to check, to study the occupied states. But if the photon energy is smaller with respect to the work function, we can also have non-linear processes because the pulse laser are very huge in intensity. And what it means? It means that electrons can absorb two photons, for example, to photoemit itself. And you can have a coherent two-photon process. It means that electrons absorbs two photons and then has an energy enough to escape from the materials, or also a step-by-step one-photon process. It means that electrons absorbs the photons and go in the higher states, in unoccupied states, and then a second photon, it is absorbed by the electrons to escape from the materials. In this way, nonlinear photoemission is able to have information of both occupied and unoccupied state. Okay, this is a spectrum collected on my group a few years ago, and in this spectrum we see these two states, S and IF, the surface states and the image potential state, and this is the surface state, electrons coming from the surface states photoemitted by absorbing two photons. Here we have a surface states, photoemitted by absorbing three photons, and in this region we can see a little structure that is this state, the image potential state, photoemitted by absorbing four photons. Therefore, the probability to have more photons involved in the process is very, very high. Okay, in the second step, we have the travel of the electrons towards the surface. During this path, electrons can scatter with other electrons, with the phonon, and usually in the photoemission spectrum, we see a structure ascribed to the energy, to the level where the electron comes from, but also a background due to the scattering, because the electron in this path lose some of its energy, and then we have this background. What does change? Okay, for this reason, photoemission is a surface-sensitive technique. Okay, and the penetration depth is very small in the materials. Okay, when this is a universal curve, the point is that when we use a soft X-ray or a ultraviolet lamp, we have that the electron coming from a depth of about 1 angstrom. If we use a laser, we have that the depth increases up to 10 10 or so 11 angstrom. Therefore, laser photoemission is more of bulk with respect to the standard photoemission. Okay, in the third step, we have that electrons across the surface and then it escapes from the materials. In this transmission through the surface, we have a conservation only of the parallel component of the momentum associated to the electrons. It means that only the k-parallel is conserved in this process. It's the same when you put a pencil in water. You see a pencil as broken, and this is due to the conservation only a parallel component of the key. Okay, when we use a photoemission, thanks to the conservation of the k-parallel and thanks to the energy conservation, we are able to plot the band, the electrons, the band of the materials with respect to the k-parallel, and so to study the band dispersion of the materials. What does change when we use a laser? When we use a laser, the kinetic energy of the electron is very small because the photon energy is small, and then in this case we have a sort of shrinking of the momentum space that you can check by using laser photoemission. For example, this is the band dispersion of graphene when we use a ultraviolet lamp, but if you use a laser as a source, you are able to check only this part of the momentum space. Okay, this is a famous figure where laser photoemission is compared with standard photoemission collected on synchrotron by using a synchrotron light at 28 electron volt and 52 electron volt. It is evident that the signal coming from laser spectroscopy is sharper with respect to this one. This because if you use a laser, we have an higher momentum resolution because you have a shrinking on the momentum space, and that you are able to have more resolution in k-parallel with respect to the other sources. We have a higher energy resolution because the energy resolution when we use a laser is about 30 milliV. And also in higher quality data in a shorter amount of time because the intensity of the laser pulse is very high. Therefore, usually the spectrum collected by using a laser are a higher resolution with respect to the other collected on the same materials by using other photon energy or a lamp or a synchrotron. Okay, moreover, if you use a laser, it's possible also to study the electronic structure in time domain, because when we have a pulse, a laser beam, you can also to split this laser beam in two beams by using an interferometer. An interferometer, a Michelson interferometer, is good for this to separate the laser beam. And you have two beams. The first is the pump here, and the second is the probe. Okay, if you change by using a delay line, the delay time between the pump and the probe, you are able to check the electronic structure in time. What it means? It means that the pump excites the system and then changes the electronic structure of the systems. And the probe is able to catch different snapshots, different delay time, in order to show you how the electronic structures evolves in time, as we have a movie of the electronic structure in time. Okay, these are, for example, a measurement, also this figure is very famous, where we have the electronic structure, the band without the pump or with the negative delay time of the probe with respect to the pump before the arrival of the pump. And this is a 0 femtosecond. It means that the pump and probe are in coincidence. And this is the electronic structure in time after 100 femtoseconds, 200 femtoseconds. And you are able to reveal how the electronic structure evolves in time after the pump arrival. Okay, in this case, when we use time-resolved laser angle-resolved photoemission spectroscopy, the pump has a photon energy smaller with respect to the work function, and on the contrary, the probe has a photon energy larger with respect to the work function. But we can also have a different setup, as for example in time-resolved nonlinear photoemission. In this case, we have that both the pump and the probe have an energy smaller with respect to the work function. It means that the pump excites electrons in this level, for example, that is an occupied level, and the probe is able to photoemit these electrons. And you can change the delay time between the probe, the pump and the probe, and to study the relaxation of the electron in this level. Or, for example, possible charge transfer of the electron from this level to other levels, to another materials, if you have more materials. Okay, therefore, to conclude this first part, the idea is the following. When we use a laser as a source for photoemission, you have an higher momentum resolution, an higher energy resolution, and also a higher quality data. By using time-resolved, there are studied different materials, topological insulator, ITC superconductor, and so on. With nonlinear photoemission, we are able to check occupied and unoccupied states, and also I will show you interface states. With time-resolved nonlinear photoemission, we studied different surfaces, in particular metal surfaces, also topological insulators, and other and different interfaces. Okay, this is our experimental setup in my lab. We have an amplified titanium sapphire laser system, and we have a 1 kHz of repetition rate. It means that we have a pulse every 1 milliseconds. And we have that the pulse duration is about 130 femtoseconds. And what is important is that we have the possibility to change the photon energy. This is important because you can choose a particular photon energy to excite a particular optical transition, and then to study how the electron excited in these levels evolves in time. Okay, this is our experimental chamber. We have a time on fly, and this is the apparatus for photoemission process. Okay, the aim of the research collected in these last years by my research group was focused on the interfaces. We have studied in particular molecules on metals, different molecules on metals, and also graphene metal interface. In particular, we have studied these interfaces. We start with this first one, molecules on metal interfaces. Okay, this is the paper published on this aim, on this research focus, and this is in collaboration with Francesco Sedona and Mauro Sambi in Padova. Okay. Okay. We have chosen this interface, porphyrins on silver. The interaction of molecules with a metal substrate is a crucial element in charge injection device. And by using time-resolved two-photon photoemission, we are able to have information of the alignment of the energy levels at the interface, and by resolving the time domain, we have also information of the charge transfer from the metal to the molecules, or on the contrary, to the molecules on the metal. Okay, these are the spectra collected by using a linear photoemission. It means that the photon energy is larger with respect to the work function, and then we are able to measure only the occupied states. And here we have the position of the highest occupied molecular orbital of the molecules. The molecules is the porphyrin, and the substrate is two different orientation of silver. 100 and 111. This is important for the results. Okay, this is the spectra collected in nonlinear photoemission, and in this case we are able to measure both occupied and unoccupied states. In fact, here we have the first excited state here, this is an occupied state of the molecules, and the second excited state here in both the interfaces on silver 111 and in silver 100 and also in silver 111. Okay, these two states, the first excited one and the second excited one, can be related to the absorption band in the optical measurements in the visible and ultraviolet absorption spectrum. Here, in fact, we have two bands, the SORAY bands and the Q bands, the first in the ultraviolet regime and the second in the visible regime. And therefore, these two states that we have observed in photoemission are related to these two bands in the absorption spectrum. And this is the energy alignment that we obtain at these interfaces because this technique is able to define, to reveal where, for example, the first excited state, where is the energy of this state with respect, for example, to the Fermi, and so on. And what is important is that also, the electronic structure of the substrate of silver 100 and silver 111 is different. Why? Because in this case here, we have empty bands of the metal, and these empty bands are resonant in energy with the first excited states. This is true when we have silver 100, but it is not true when we have silver 111, because here we have a gap in the projected band structure of silver 111. And this is important for time-resolved measurements. Okay, why? Because when you have these empty states, it's possible to excite that laser excite electrons from the SP bands to these bands. These electrons are called hot electrons because the temperature of these electrons is higher with respect to the temperature of the sample due to the scattering processes between the molecules. And okay, hot electrons can play a crucial role in different processes in charge transfer, and hot electrons are able to mediate femtochemistry, for example, or also to give rise to electron injection in solar cells, or also a charge injection in organic light emitting diodes, because the idea is the following: the laser arrives, excites hot electrons here, and this electron can scatter with the sample, with the phonons, after 1 picoseconds, or also to transfer to the adsorbate. Okay, this is the measurement collected by using a pump and probe setup. This is a time-resolved nonlinear photoemission, and here we can see how the spectrum changes in these two regions by changing the pump and probe delay times. Okay, the first region is ascribed to the Fermi level, and the second region is due to the first excited states. Okay, for this region, the Fermi region, we can see here two Fermi level. It means that the Fermi is only one in the materials, but we have a dual channel for photoemission. In fact, electrons can be excited from the Fermi level by absorbing 2 photons of the probe, or also 1 photon of the pump and 1 photon of the probe. And this channel is competitive with respect to this one. Therefore, when we have a coincidence in time between the pump and probe, you have here a decrease of the intensity of the Fermi level photoemitted by using 2 photons of the probe. Here we have the integrated intensity of this part of the spectrum versus the pump probe delay time. And we have that the intensity increases and then decreases. And this part width is the same of the laser because this is a coherent process. Okay, what happens for this state, the first excited state? Okay, this first excited state, in principle, can be photoemitted by absorbing a photon of the pump and a photon of the probe, because electron from the occupied states can be excited thanks to the pump in the first excited states, and the probe photoemit the electrons. Okay, if we plot the integrated intensity with respect to the pump and probe delay time, we have this behavior, the green behavior here. We have that the relaxation time that measures the lifetime of the electrons in this state is about 800 femtoseconds, in agreement with the optical measurements carried out on these molecules. But it is strange, this effect, because the maximum of the increase of this intensity is shifted in time with respect to the intensity of the Fermi. And it is strange for a coherent or a direct process. And the idea, it has been that we can also have a different population channel for these first excited states that involves hot electrons. The idea is that the laser is able to excite electrons in these sp unoccupied bands, and this electron transfer to the first excited states, and then the probe is able to photoemit it. In this case, this delay, 250 femtoseconds, could be justified. In order to verify this idea, this scenario, we have collected the same measurements on silver 111, where we don't have hot electrons. And in fact, if we perform the measurements on silver 111, where we don't have unoccupied bands where we can excite hot electrons, you observe an increase of the first excited states, but the intensity, the maximum of the intensity, it is at the same time, at the zero delay time, of the increase of the Fermi intensity. It means that when we have the possibility to have hot electrons are involved in the population process of the first excited states. When this possibility is absent, we have the direct excitation in the molecule from the occupied states to the unoccupied states, and then the photoemission. Therefore, at the interface between molecules and the metal, the role of the hot electrons is crucial for the charge transfer. Okay, in the second part of this talk, I discuss about this interface, graphene on metal interface. Okay, and in particular on this state, we have studied the so-called interface states. What are interface states? Interface states are states that are a maximum in the wave function, or at the surface here of the metal, in this case we have surface states, or between metal and graphene, in this case we have a quantum well states, but also, quantum well states, but also here in this part, and here we have image potential state. These states are very important also for charge transfer processes, but because they have particular, peculiar properties. This is not only it's important for charge transfer, but also to check the interaction between graphene and metal. As reported in this paper, these states, interface states, are able, can be used as a quantum probe of graphene-metal interaction. Okay, this is a particular interface state, the so-called image potential state, but the idea is the following. These states are completely free, the electrons are completely free electron-like in the plane parallel to the surface, and on the contrary, they are localized in the zeta direction. In fact, they are localized here, and it means here outside to the surface. They live out of the materials, and they are localized in this direction, and moreover they have a long lifetime. This is important for charge transfer processes. Moreover, they have a particular properties, that is the effective mass, that is very sensitive to a modification of the interface. Okay. A graphene on metal interface is a very interesting interface because we can have two different interaction at this interface. We can have a weakly interacting system. It means this is, for example, the case of graphene on iridium, graphene on platinum, graphene on gold. And the point is that the distance between graphene and metal is the same of the distance between the graphene layer in graphite. And we have no hybridization between the pi band on graphene and the D level of the metal. And it means for graphene that the famous Dirac cone does not change when we put the graphene on these metals. On the contrary, when you put graphene on ruthenium, for example, or nickel, we have a strong interaction between these two materials. And this way we have a strong hybridization between the pi bands of graphene and the D level of the metals. Also the Dirac cone changes, and the distance is smaller because the distance is usually about 2 angstrom. Okay. And these interface states are really a probe to check this interaction. In fact, this is a paper that reported graphene on iridium-111. And in this case, what we can see is that when we have graphene on iridium, the interface states of the metals have the same properties of the metals. It means that the binding energy, the effective mass, do not change when we put graphene on this metal. On the contrary, when you have, for example, graphene on ruthenium, we have a strong corrugation of the graphene on these metals. It means that we have the H region and the L region. In this case, we have a sort of mountain, and the distance between the graphene and the metal is about 3 angstrom. Therefore, this is a weakly interacting region. On the contrary, here we have a sort of valley, and the distance between the graphene and metal is about 2 angstrom. Therefore, it is a strongly interacting region. And the result is that we have 2 image potential state, 2 surface states due to this region. Every region, the H region and the L region, give rise to a couple of image states and a couple of surface states. Okay, we have studied these systems, a weakly interacting system, in particular graphene on copper, and we also study a strongly interacting system, graphene on nickel 111. And we have schematized this interface by using 2 potential wells. Because we have a first potential well between the graphene and the metals. Why we have a potential barrier here? Because in the projected band structure of the metal, we have usually, to have an image potential state, you have a gap. Therefore, we have here a gap that originates this potential barrier, and here, where we have graphene, a delta potential, and here we have the Coulombic potential. This Coulombic potential is familiar for image potential state because the idea is the following. When you have the photoemission, electrons has a Coulombic interaction with the holes that lives in the metal. Therefore, we have this Coulombic potential. And in this way, we have 2 wells, the first here and the second here. Therefore, in principle, you can have state here in the first quantum well, but also here in the second quantum well. Okay, we have measured, in collaboration with Fulvio Parmigiani and Petra Rudolph, graphene on copper 111, and we have observed the surface states, the quantum well states, and the image potential states. And these are the measurements. We've also collected the measurement by changing the polarization and so on. We have measured also the properties of these states. It means the effective mass and the binding energy. Okay, and we have also calculated by using a one potential model. This is not a Benizio calculum, but is a parametric model that works in this way. We put in the calculum the energy that we measure experimentally, and then we match the potential, and then you have information on the wave function. And in effect, what we can observe that when we have a surface state, the maximum is here, very close to the surface. When we have the image potential state, we have a maximum in this part here. And when we have a quantum well state, we have a maximum here. In this case, we have a sort of hybridization between the image potential state and quantum well state. And this explains also a maximum here between metal and the graphene. Okay, we have experimentally checked this model by growing graphene on a polycrystalline foil of copper. In this case, we do not have a gap here, and then we don't have a potential barrier. In this case, we have only one wells here. And in effect, we have only one feature, the image potential state, confirming that the quantum well state, in this case, we cannot have a quantum potential state here because you don't have this barrier, this potential barrier. Okay, but the idea is what happens when we reduce, decrease the width of this potential well from 3 angstrom to 2 angstrom. This is the case of graphene, for example, or nickel 111. Okay, this is the surface states of polished nickel 111. It is complicated because we have two surface states, S1 and the other is here in the majority spin because it's a ferromagnetic materials, and we have also the surface states in the minority spin. This is the spectrum collected by Osterwalder group by using a lamp, a helium lamp, and the surface states that you are able to check in photoemission are only the S1 in the majority spin and the S2 in the minority spin, these two. And they appear here as a little shoulder in the spectrum. If you compare this data taken with the helium lamp with the laser photoemission, we see that the only feature in the spectrum are S1 and S2 because laser photoemission is very sensitive to the surface states or interface states. And we have studied also the dispersion of this state. Okay, and we have a measure on graphene on nickel 111, the three states, the surface states, the image potential state, and the quantum well states. This is in collaboration, and so I thank also my collaborators, the group Cinzia Cepek and Christina Afric. Okay, and these are the parameters that we have measured of these interface states, the effective mass and also the binding energy. But what is important in these results? It is important that as in a classical particle in a box, this is a problem of physics, we have that when we decrease the width of the potential well, we have that the energy of the states increases. When we reduce this term, the energy increases. And this happens when you have graphene on copper and graphene on nickel. In this case, we have that the width is about 3 angstrom and the energy is 0.5. But when we reduce the width and up to 2 angstrom, we have that the energy increases, similar to a particle in a box problem. What is strange? It's strange that also the effective mass changes, and it is not clear for me, and more theoretical investigation are necessary to explain this effect. Okay, in the case of graphene on nickel, we are able to, in collaboration with the theory group in Milan, we are able also to reproduce this data by using DFT and therefore ab initio calculation in this case. Okay, This is the calculation collected obtained on nickel 111, and this on graphene on nickel 111. Here I zoom of this part of the spectrum, and when you have a nickel, you have a surface states here, a couple of surface states here, and here the image potential state. It is known that the FT is not able to reproduce exactly a gap. A gap is not estimated correctly in this case. And here graphene on nickel. When we have graphene on nickel, we have the surface states, the quantum well states, and again the image potential states. Therefore, also by using ab initio calculation, we are able to reproduce these states, these interface states. This is not completely, this is not true for graphene on copper 111. In fact, to be able to have an interface, a quantum well states, we have to decrease the graphene and the copper distance up to 2 angstrom. And this is not true because when you measure the distance between graphene and copper, it is a weakly interacting system, and the distance is about 3 angstrom. Therefore, in this case, we have that graphene on ab initio calculation are able to reproduce the data on graphene on nickel and not on graphene on copper. Okay, I have finished. Okay, and this is, I want to thank all the people that have in different years collaborated in my group, in particular Silvia Tognolini, Stefano Ponzoni, and Gianluca Galimberti here in this picture. And also I want to thank all the group, my collaborators, I don't know, Mariani in Roma, Cinzia in Trieste, and in particular the theory group in Milan. Here we have reported the paper where we can find more details on the research that I have shown here in this talk. And thank you very much for your attention. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year with laser, because the Christmas has been built with the laser. Okay.
So you were showing these plots of two-photon emission where you observed 2 Fermi levels. And,
yes, in the molecules on the on a metal. Yes.
But when you showed the data on the molecules on this 111 surface,
yes,
there didn't seem to be the appearance of this double Fermi level.
No, because the signal is smaller in this case. I think that in this case we have not the same layers of the molecules on the metal. Okay. Two factors, in my opinion, can affect this, the variation of the intensity. The first is the number of layers of the molecules that we have grown on the metal. And the second is that when we put a laser on a light on a metal, we have a different probability to have to excite a channel, or rather than a channel, another channel. In this case, we have that the two-photon photoemission from a Fermi level is different in the two cases. Okay. The other point is that when we have silver 100, we have states at the Fermi level. When we have 111, we have a gap. Therefore, the Fermi states that you observe coming from not k parallel equals 0, but to a k parallel different from 0, because this process is involved a k parallel exchange. Because if I go back to the electronic structure, okay, of the metal, okay, here we have that Fermi level have bands and then electrons at the Fermi level. We do not have electrons at the Fermi level, and also this is the reason for this different intensity, I think.
Thank you.
More questions?
So these molecules are ordered, the layers?
Yes, in this case, porphyrin is very similar to the phthalocyanin, and we have usually a layer of molecules. It's a planar molecules, and we have that the layer is in a plane parallel to the metal. It's because we have a sort of a self-assembly molecular films on metals.
Okay, can you then use this method to estimate disorder? For example, you would introduce some disorder in these metals. Would you estimate the amount of diagonal disorder from the width of the lines or something like that?
Ma due to the laser, cioè disorder that the laser is able to
disorder
create.
in the molecules.
In the molecules,
in the layers.
In the layer not, but in the collaboration with, because this work has been collected in collaboration with the Padova group that have performed scanning, tunneling microscopy, and usually this molecule have not a disorder. We have this molecule that forms films.
But you cannot use this method
No,
to estimate
no,
the
I
amount
think
of
this-
disorder in the
No,
layer?
no. This method, I think that is not able to give information on the disorder. I'm sure that the laser, I'm sure, I confident that the laser does not damage the molecules, because we have performed these measurements different times, and we also check by using a micro Raman the layer, the molecular layer, and I'm sure that the laser is not able to damage the molecules layer.
Little things. I'm not an expert. No? It's a lot of information to grasp if you're not involved with this. Now, is it difficult to prepare an oriented sample of copper or nickel? Is it?
I
how
don't
do you
know,
do it?
because I buy I buy these crystals from a factory, and then we can choose the orientation of this metal. The idea is that this metal, as copper or silver, has a band-defined structure, because the atoms are at the edge of a cube. And also an electron and an atom inside, at the center of this cube. And this factory, I don't know well, are able to cut this cube in one particular direction. And then you have 111 or 100.
I have some experience, because in my PhD I had to grow single crystals of gallium metal, and I had to orient it, right, or grow it different direction and well oriented, and I did it myself. It took me about 3 months, but I X-ray and did pattern.
Okay, yes, X-ray, but also we use a lead. Lead is an electron diffraction to check the quality of the same. Okay, we can use electron to check the order on the surface, or X-ray to check the order in all the sample, in the bulk.
I thought that you make yourself. And so, you shown some pictures where you have a slide metal and then graphene.
Graphene,
but they're separated by some 2 angstroms. So why?
2 angstrom, okay, this depends on the interaction between the graphene and the metal. Usually the layer of graphene in graphite, HOPG, is about 3 angstrom. It means that we have a weak interaction, because there is a van der Waals interaction between these layers. And if you have a non-interacting system, graphene wants to stay at the same distance with respect to the metal. But when we have an interaction between the atoms of carbon with the metal, this distance decreases, because we have an interaction, and also we have no more van der Waals interaction between graphene and metals.
Okay, fine.
Okay, thank you.
And the surface of metal is polished, right? It's very
Yeah, sure. By sputtering and annealing, we bombard this surface with argon ion to polish, and then we heat the substrate to have an order of the atoms on the top of the surface.
Any more questions? Okay, if not, let's thank the speaker again.